Hi, Rose. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
I am so excited to have you on the show. We have Rose Kormanyos with us today. She is an LMFT, a marriage and family therapist, and I am so excited for her to share with us her go-to skill because I think it's going to be something that's even helpful for me to kind of review. So,
Love it.
Rose, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, I'm a marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice. It's called Redwood Couples Counseling. I specialize in what I lovingly call couples therapy for nerds. I am a nerd. I used to be an ecologist before I became a therapist, and I find that I can really connect with kind of the more sciencey thinkers. So I work with a lot of STEM professionals and academics and kind of people that are up in their heads, but maybe want to get more in touch with kind of the emotional end of things to thrive in their relationships.
Yeah. So, how did you go from ecology to therapy?
Yeah, I started feeling like, I still love ecology. I still go hiking and like to nerd out in like science museums. But I was kind of looking down a career of creating a lot of research on something that wasn't really changing anytime soon unless policy really gets involved. And I kind of was just, I started doing some volunteer work on a crisis hotline actually. And I loved the idea of being able to help somebody with their problem like right now. And so, yeah, I still very much love ecology, respect academic research in all its forms. But for me, I just wanted to be able to have an impact a little bit more immediately with folks. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a good fit.
Yeah. How did you get into doing couples counseling and couples therapy?
Yes. So, yeah, my training was as a family therapist. So, even when I transitioned from ecology to therapy, I was still thinking in terms of like systems. Like, I loved about ecology is you've got all these different organisms influencing each other, and you've got the climate and the genetics and how it all works together. So, I was really drawn to working with families because it's a similar thing. You've got a complex system and all these different dynamics. And so then I honed in on couples after I trained in a type of therapy called emotionally focused therapy or EFT. Actually, when you and I used to work together, I was struggling because I loved working with families, but I didn't feel like I was being very effective. I was like, gosh, I don't know. Like, there's all these different theories of how to work with families, and I just didn't feel like I could pull them off and still feel like myself. A
Hmm.
lot of them were kind of like, you got to be the expert. And honestly, some of them felt kind of like playing mind games
Yep.
with the family. Like you come up with these interventions and you try to like persuade them to do them. And then I found emotionally focused therapy, which at least for me is a really awesome fit. It's very much, the therapist is the guide in terms of the process, but we really let the couple or the family kind of lead the way in terms of what they're feeling, what they're needing. And there's a lot of neurobiology involved too. We think a lot about what happens in the brain and the body, and
Yeah.
a field that's called attachment psychology,
Yep.
which is kind of, yeah, the just nervous system level stuff that gets laid down in our bodies and our early relationships and how that shows up in the present. So,
Yeah. I can
yeah,
hear kind of like the sciencey stuff still behind this,
yeah,
where
it's
like
totally
it
true.
it feels like and it feels kind of like a natural progression of things and kind of like a
Yeah.
holding on to the things that are important for you and feeling effective.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. I felt that way too. I feel like I still think a lot about the ecology principles and things I use as an ecologist, but it's like, oh, now my system is the couple or the
Yeah.
family or whoever's
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is your go-to skill strategy? What's something that you teach the couples that you work with that you actually use in your own life?
Yes. So I happen to be married. And I think about my own, it's funny because I think about when I'm working with my couples, I'm also, hey, I'm in there with you guys. This stuff is hard for me too. The first thing, I have two. The first thing maybe isn't as much a skill as something that I've done. I feel like it's important to be able to go where we're trying to guide clients, like I'm not going to try to take you down a path that I haven't gone myself. So I
Mhm.
think the first thing that I think is have been helpful for me is that my spouse and I have done our own couples therapy.
Yeah.
So I've been on the other side of the couch, so to speak, which I think is really valuable when I'm working with couples. I can remember like how tough it can be or how much courage it takes to like look at our own relationship dynamics.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that like every good therapist has a therapist. And
The
I feel like
same.
that makes sense, right? Like if you are doing couples therapy, like having had that experience to be able to
Mhm.
like speak to it and kind of understand some of the
Yeah,
barriers that might get in the way.
totally. It's not easy to be on on that side of the couch for sure.
Yeah.
So I think I love that we have done that. The other skill that I find myself using a lot is the idea of really doing a full-hearted apology.
Mm.
Um, like I don't know if you are this way, Kim, but I really like to be right about things, and I'm pretty stubborn. I think my partner would say that he's the same way. So when we can get into a situation, sometimes it can be tempting for us to each just spend time arguing about how, like, well, no, my position makes sense because of this reason, and you're wrong. No, you're wrong, right? Which will just spin us up into a
For sure.
an epic argument. Versus if one or both of us, I'll just use myself as an example here. Like if I can really slow down and say, okay, hold on, I'm going to take my own shit, which I think is very compelling and totally makes sense in my head, and like pick it up and put it over here and really focus in and listen to how is my partner hurt by this interaction? What role did I even have? Which is the really hard part for me, is like, keeping at bay my like justifications for why I did or said what I did, and really just listening and understanding what he's feeling, being
Yeah.
able to feel that, you know, and really take a moment to empathize before, before apologizing. It's so much more powerful than if I'm like, okay, sorry, but here's what was making sense for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That like drive to like explain our position, where we're coming from. Like it's so automatic sometimes that,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially if we have any remote stubborn tendencies in us, we're like, but wait.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So what does it look like to do that in the moment? Especially
Hmm.
because I'm thinking about how those situations tend to be high stress. We do tend to be already a
Hmm.
little bit on the defense, just very
So right.
automatically and naturally. So how do you
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point, because that's part of what we talk about in emotionally focused therapy is that, our nervous systems can get activated in like a fraction of a second. And the blood flow actually shifts around in our brain. So we literally have less blood in the front of our brain that does like communication and complex thinking. And we have more in the back that does like fighting and running away.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a challenge. And I can feel that if you and your viewers start to pay attention, you might be able to feel that, how when something gets tense with a partner or a loved one, like it feels like we think differently.
Yeah.
So I won't say I'm perfect at this, also, by the way, but when I'm successful, I think I can start to notice that, oh, I'm kind of in that activated state.
Mhm.
Maybe take a couple deep breaths, maybe remind myself, even though I might be really frustrated at my partner and vice versa, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And I thought about how to try to describe this when you reached out to me, because I was like, how do I describe what I do? But it's almost like a physical feeling. Like I can feel, maybe this feels a little different for everyone, but I can feel my desire to like justify where I was coming from, like almost like a tension in my chest. It's like rising up and just
Mhm.
wants to come out. So it's almost like a physical process. Like I have to like, you know, kind of put it aside, remind myself that, okay, that's not going to help in this particular moment. I'm choosing to put that aside so I can really tend to my partner and hear what's happening for
Yeah.
them and how they might be hurt. And I think that recognition of like the physical feeling is the
Yeah.
second physical part for me, is really feeling that kind of awful guilt feeling when I really have to, when I don't put up my justification shield
Yeah.
and I have to actually feel the way that my, missteps have actually hurt my partner's feelings. That's
Hmm.
awful. Like I think all of us want to kind of wriggle out of that feeling.
Yeah.
Um, Versus can I challenge myself to really sit in that and feel that? Like for me, I feel it kind of in like the pit of my stomach.
Yeah.
Um, and I find that it's only through really feeling that I can really empathize with what's happened for him, and then really give what I feel like is a full-hearted apology. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I can see how much of a butt I was being, how much that hurt you, and wow, I'm really sorry. And maybe we don't even get to my awesome reasons for being such a butt. Or maybe we do, but it usually has to be second. It has to be
Mhm.
after, I can really empathize and apologize. Then maybe my partner might say, well, okay, now I do kind of want to hear, where were you coming from?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't know if this question is going to put you on the spot, but I'm thinking
It's
about
okay.
how sometimes there can be, you know, sometimes we can be very much like, oh gosh, but my point is so valid. And
Yeah.
then sometimes we can almost swing so far the other way where we might kind of lean into that wholehearted apology all
Oh,
the time. And so
too
I guess
much.
I'm kind of
Yes.
wondering, like, how do you navigate kind of maybe the balance of like engaging in that like very authentic, wholehearted apology and at
Hmm.
the same time not feeling like you're maybe sacrificing like self-respect
Yeah.
and not speaking
Yes.
about your like your perspective on things all the like does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought that up because, yes, if that's all that's ever happening, it would start to become very unbalanced. If it was always one partner taking their stuff, picking it up, putting it aside, tending to their partner's feelings, yeah, that would start to become really, really sad and really unhealthy, I'd say. So I guess built into there is kind of an assumption that, as I have a blog article about this called like the order of operations and empathy. So the
Mm,
idea isn't that we never get to my side of things, but we have to start somewhere,
yeah.
right? So usually, if one person can kind of lower their defensive walls and really hear their partner, um, maybe I'll flip it around. Like if I'm the person who's, being apologized to,
Hmm.
I don't want to hear like your justifications right now. Like I'm still really upset.
Yes.
But if I can really experience you as like, okay, you get it. Like you've heard how I'm feeling. I can also describe this. Like I've felt this too. Like I've been all up in arms, like, oh no, you did the shitty thing. But then once my partner really hears me, it's like there's a softening
Yeah.
that I can feel. And then I naturally do want to hear, their side too. Then I might naturally say, well, help me understand what was going on for you.
Yeah.
Um, so I,
Yeah.
I love that you asked that because we do need both. It's not fair for one person to just always be like, you know, burying their feelings and tending to our partner. We want that. Or if my partner doesn't tend to ask, maybe I can bring it up later, after, not like weeks later, but like a moment later, like after I feel like I've really heard my partner, thought about their position, apologize. Maybe I can say, could I tell you a little bit about what was happening for me in that moment too? Because I want to see if you could understand my side as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a really good way to feel like there can be that balance and to
Mhm.
feel, especially if this is something new happening, if this
Mhm.
is not like a something that already exists within the relationship,
Right.
it seems like that's a good way of maybe kind of like tuning in with how do we establish a balance with this and like what does it look like
Mhm.
to maintain that? So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
you're so welcome. I love it.
So if anyone wants to learn more about this, like authentic apologies and really kind of getting in touch with you to like learn more about this or couples counseling, how do they find you?
Yeah, so I have a website. My practice is currently based in Ohio, although I did just move to California. So I'm in the process of setting up a practice that will serve Ohio and California.
Yay.
But yay! But for right now, my website is redwoodcounselingcincinnati.com. So yeah, people can check that out if people are not in Ohio or we just want to find out about more therapists that use emotionally focused therapy. There's a great website. It's wordy. It's the International Center for Excellence in Emotionally Focused Therapy, or also ICEFT. So it's www.iceeft.com. And you can put in your zip code and find the therapists in your area that are trained in EFT.
Perfect. Perfect. And I'll
Yeah.
put the links to that in
Oh,
the down
that'd be
below
great.
the video so everybody can find that and your
Awesome.
website as well. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing this with us. I'm excited to try this
Great.
myself because I feel like this
Yeah,
will
let me know
really
how it goes.
it's making me think a lot about a lot of the mindfulness tools and skills that I use. And I'm
I
thinking about
bet.
how like there could be a lot of overlap. And my dog just walked by behind me. So
I just saw.
he maybe learned some things as well. He can try to. So
Yeah, mindfulness is a great, that's a great, that's probably a whole nother cool conversation about like how mindfulness and our relationship dynamics can kind of dovetail. So
yeah.
absolutely, that's a cool connection.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for
If you
having
guys
me.
have questions or concerns, y'all know how to find Rose. Her info will be below the video.